So my name is Chris. Chris Fritz. I'm on the core team of Vue.js, and I specialize in basically anything that can improve the development experience for users. Because as like a consultant who uses Vue all the time to build things and helps other people build things, improving the development experience is kind of selfish. So it kind of works both ways. It makes my job easier, and also makes a lot of other people's jobs easier. And that's kind of it. That's the short intro.
All right, I'm going to ask my question first, and then we'll pass it around. So my kind of intro question was, so you're working on the Vue.js docs is one of the things that you do.
Yep.
Okay, this is a brief first question. How many years have you been doing that for now?
For the Vue docs?
Yeah.
Ooh, I think I basically kind of took over in, I think it might have been June, a couple Junes back. So maybe like a year and a half or something of that. Like when Vue 2 was being developed, basically I created an issue with a bunch of different tasks broken down so that we could parallelize all of the, migrating the docs to Vue 2. And then I ended up doing 95% of it because I think people just liked the docs that I asked them to review, and they said, "Oh, that's really good. That's probably better than I would do. Maybe I just won't do anything. Maybe I'll just review your work, Chris." And then that's kind of what happened for most of it. And then, yeah, no one really elected me or assigned me docs duty. I just kind of showed up and spoke confidently, I guess, and then people started asking me for permission to do things on docs, and that's where we are today.
Have there ever, so you talked about the migration from Vue 1 to Vue 2 docs. Have there been other big initiatives or big changes to the docs, like reorganizations, or has it mainly been just iterating on what's there to make it better and better?
Yeah, there have been. So one of the biggest reorganizations that we've done is to break out the components page, which used to be really long, definitely the longest page in the docs and hard to get through, especially because it was in the essentials. And we broke down the components page in the essentials to just some basics that people should know about components, and then went into much more detail about different things about components. And we have a really good pull request that I still need to do some review work on to start doing some of that more work with render functions and functional components too, and I'm excited about that.
Cool. Okay, who else has questions for Chris about Vue and Vue docs and Vue learning and anything?
I'm curious, when you started either if you started contributing first or if you were I don't know how you become a core team member.
Yeah.
But what that process was like for you, and when you decided ooh, I really want to pursue Vue.
So I was just eating a candy bar one day, and there was a golden ticket. I'm just kidding. That's how everyone joins the Vue team. And most of the time, they happen to be programmers. What really happened is I was using Vue a lot for my day-to-day work, especially in data visualization and animation, which used to be and still is one of my specialties as a consultant. And I remember there was some stuff that I wasn't sure how to do this thing in Vue, or there was something that I needed Vue to do that it couldn't already do. And so I started making contributions, and including some contributions to the docs. And eventually, Vue became a big enough thing that Evan decided, you know what, this isn't something I can just do on my own anymore. So he invited me and a handful of other people to that initial core team, and basically just so that he wouldn't have to review all of our pull requests anymore. just to make things a little bit easier, and for some things that we're working on all the time, we can just have direct push access, and we can publish releases and things like that. So really just to reduce the bureaucracy and make it so that not everything has to go through him.
So I was just wondering, I've been reading a lot about Vue 3 is supposed to be coming out relatively soon, and I'm just kind of curious what the big changes are going to be.
So I don't know if there's no like definite release date yet. So I wouldn't say relatively soon, unless like we'll probably live to see it. That's the thing I feel comfortable guaranteeing. But yeah, I mean we very well might see it in 2019. So that is exciting. And the question about like what it might look like, or what was that part of the question again? So I wouldn't say forced in is the right word. I mean, but basically, we're just improving the experience for TypeScript, and part of that involves like writing the source code in TypeScript, but that in no way affects people who just want to write JavaScript. Like they can just write JavaScript the same way that they've always been able to write it. One thing that we will be adding is some first class, no pun intended, class component support. So right now, you'll use something like Vue component. I don't remember what the library is called, but we have another officially maintained library that allows you to use class components with TypeScript and things like that. And for people who want to use that class experience, we will offer it, but it's definitely not replacing like the objective options that you can see today and use today. That'll be something that you can do alongside it. And some things will be a little bit nicer. So for example, in a class component, a computed property can just be like a get, like a getter, with an optional setter. And then we can make that reactive and do all our caching like we do with computed properties. So in some ways, some people might prefer it because there'll be less boilerplate. But no one, absolutely no one, will be forced to like use classes or use TypeScript.
I'll throw it to you. Our employees are targets. Is that what it is? I think one of the things that first got me when I started using Vue was the idea of reusability. Or maybe not even reusability, but currying out like a component. I felt like the way that the single file component, it kind of lends itself to like, oh, let me just like put everything in here.
Yeah.
It's so convenient. I never really found like a best practices thing inside of any official Vue doc. I'm just kind of curious what your take is for like, what would you consider like the best practice for trying to curry something out?
I mean, for like currying specifically, like the programming technique.
Yeah, let's
like applied to. I don't know if I like thinking about problems like that. No, really, because like I like to start problem first, and that's like one possible solution. Okay. And so I'd rather talk about like specific problems, and then talk about like what are some of the best ways to solve those problems, because. I don't know. You can make up like any kind of pattern, and you could call it like a best practice for like that pattern, or in the sense that is how you would do it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good idea in a specific context. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Sorry, I know that's probably not a helpful answer for you.
So, how much is Evan driving the like development and innovation of Vue stuff, and how much of that is like a group thing, and how much of a benevolent dictator for life is Evan?
Very benevolent. Very benevolent, because he could revoke all of my access. He's very benevolent. This is recorded, right? That is a great question. Yeah, he's definitely our benevolent dictator for life, unless he decides that he's going to step down, or unless there's a bloody revolution. In which case, I mean, right now, like, we love what Evan's doing, and there's no way that would happen. So he is a dictator in a sense, but like he's also a leader, and leaders can only get buy-in from a team like us if we actually feel respected, if we can build cool things, if we have opportunities to expand our skills. Otherwise, talented people go somewhere else. So, there's a reason that, so many people are excited to work on Vue. And a big part of that is Evan and the kind of culture that he creates and the opportunities that he gives people. That's definitely something that I've appreciated. And he also gives people a lot of opportunities to weigh in on the design process. So, for Vue 3, for example, it's not like Evan delivering down some stone tablets and then us getting to work on the source code. No, actually, right now and over the past few weeks especially, it's become a bigger part of our work. We've been doing a lot of design discussions on the higher level APIs for Vue 3, which has been really exciting. And then eventually, we'll be opening that up to a public RFC process so that people can weigh in on their own thoughts, before anything is finalized. So yeah, we are pretty, I wouldn't say democratic, because at the end of the day, someone has to make a decision, and I think that is important. We don't want a framework that's designed by committee. And there are times that I've disagreed with Evan's final decision, even after discussion. But I'd say 80% of those times, I've realized 3 months later, Evan was right. So I think he's doing a great job. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answers my question.
Okay.
Last thing that I have is, can I suggest that instead of calling it an RFC process, that it is the Vue Improvement Proposal? So it's VIP.
Would you like to submit an RFC for that?
Yeah, I'll submit VIPs. That'd be good.
That can be the first RFC to rename the RFC process. No, wait, what was the recommendation?
Vue Improvement Proposals.
Yeah, sure. I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, what were your thoughts for? Does it just sound more accessible?
In Python we have we have the PEPs, which are the Python enhancement proposals, and so sticking with that sort of concept and theme, you would go with.
I like that. That sounds less like you need a computer science degree to contribute.
Yeah, it's a little bit more friendly and a little bit less I have to get all technical.
I really like that. I'm going to pitch that to the rest of the team, and it'll probably happen. I think I'll be able to sell them on it. Good idea. We'll call them the Alex. What's your last name again? Revere. Yeah. We'll call them the Alex Revere Vue Improvement Proposals.
Well, first off, I was just going to say thank you for the good documentation. It was part of my motivation. It was one of the first things that clicked with me when I was looking at different frameworks and trying to solve problems, and that it didn't seem like there were 12 prerequisites, you just jump into things where I'm like, wait a second, I'm supposed to know that already, and so kudos there. Question about, and it's related to his question about kind of one of the things I've not struggled with, but one of the things I'd be interested in from your point of view is what projects are out there, what repos are out there that you could recommend looking at to study in terms of kind of maybe not canonical ways of putting things together, but ways you feel like they're well structured.
In terms of an application?
I feel like we're all kind of in the
like a
wild
Vue
where
application?
we're making it up as we go. Well, at least I am, and it's just in the way things are structured and the way things kind of fit together. So if you had any recommendations on stuff that you would say is out there that you can go read and learn from.
Well, it's funny you should ask, because I have a little library called Vue Enterprise Boilerplate on GitHub. It's at github.com/chrisfritz/Vue Enterprise Boilerplate, hyphens in between those words. And it's a lovely little project that'll help answer a lot of those questions in terms of how to put things together. Frankly, I originally started it as basically the template that I was using for my enterprise clients, and really almost every project, no matter what level or scale it's on. And I found that when I was doing that initial work, to just get them a good starting code base, I was making it pretty much the same every time. and then making some, marginal improvements over time. And so eventually I just decided to open source all of that work so that everybody else could take advantage of it, and I still maintain it, and I still use it for projects. And this way I can skip past that putting together the skeleton of a project and actually get to the more fun work of building what they're actually trying to build right away. And as part of open sourcing it, I get to see a lot of other people's thoughts and experiences on what they've seen work, what they've struggled with, and they've helped make it even better than I could make it on my own. So I definitely check that out. And it's also one of those few repos where I actually encourage bike shedding in the issues. So if you wanna open an issue just to ask a question, that's totally cool, or to share your opinion or share your experience, I'd love that.
Hi, Chris. I always remember you for creating that 7 secrets that whoever doesn't want to, like the Vue developers.
The 7 secret patterns Vue consultants don't want you to know?
Yeah, that's great.
It's kind of clickbaity, isn't it?
Okay. I always had problem finding real-life scenarios to use the first one. I eventually managed to do that, so that's great.
Good.
Since then, do you have any other similar tips like that? That is really, I know, secret. It's recorded.
It's funny you should ask. So for the conference, for the final time, I will be giving a 7 secrets talk again at Connect Tech. And every time I give the talk, I switch out some tips. So you're going to see some new stuff, including, spoiler alert, some sneak peeks into Vue 3. So that they're like super secret patterns.
One of the things that we've really appreciated moving from React to Vue is just how all the best practices seem to have been blessed by the core team. With Vue 3, I'm reading Evan's Medium post, and there's the split in builds to support Internet Explorer. Are you kind of concerned about fragmentation moving forward?
Fragmentation in terms of people who are...
Other libraries and other open source contributions only on the Evergreen build as opposed to having to backfill for legacy browsers?
Well, I mean, we see it as, that's a great question. We see it as our job to backport anything that can be made compatible with the non-proxy branch, the non-next branch, with regular Vue, because we want everybody to be able to have the same experience no matter what browsers they have to support. And if people have to, learn a different Vue, like jumping from project to project, I know for me, as a consultant who works on a lot of different projects, that would be so confusing for me if I had to remember which features I could use depending on which browsers they happen to be supporting, and I would constantly make mistakes. So that would be something that would be very painful for me if it was not a nice experience. So I will be, and a lot of other people, because a lot of other people on the core team, which is quite different from the core team of many other frameworks, we're actually Vue developers. We use Vue to build applications in our day jobs oftentimes, and in side projects. So if it would be painful, it would be painful to us too. So yeah, that is something that we are concerned with, and are very heavily incentivized to make sure that there isn't a confusing, fragmented situation.
It's scary when you're trying to pitch the adoption of Vue moving away. Just at least reading it sounds like, oh, it's going to split. That's the big
Now, actually, it's pretty cool. So a lot of it will kind of be an implementation detail. So really, you just and people are already doing this with Babel, so it's really not that much different. It's just more optimizations based on this, building off the same model that we've been using for a while. When you're using Babel, you can tell it which browsers you need to support, and it'll only, polyfill the features that aren't supported in those browsers. So it'll be the same kind of thing, where it's possible, you'll be able to use a more advanced version of Vue when you don't need to support those browsers. And when not, you'll be able to use a less advanced version of Vue that like can't have all the same like optimizations, but will still work, and will still work exactly like you've been using it. So it's not like you're going to have to use a broken version of Vue or anything. Like, it's still going to be as fast as you're all enjoying currently. And with the CLI, like, there's something really cool that we're doing right now with modern mode. Is that something that you saw in the blog post, or was that a different blog post? Okay, well then we won't worry about that unless someone asks a question about it. But that's also something that's pretty cool. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay. Yeah.
Chris, tell us about modern mode.
So modern mode is a new feature of Vue CLI 3 that allows you to build a legacy version of your app and also a modern version of your app. So the modern version is built for browsers that support the latest features, so that when you're using a lot of Babel features, you can actually use the like raw, like run by the browser's runtime version of those features that tend to be faster and often work better. There are some Babel features that have like some slight quirks, or especially like performance de-optimizations, where I can't remember if they fixed this yet, but there was an issue that we've seen where if you have a const or a let inside an if statement, then that's actually a performance de-optimization that can become significant in something like a library where you really have to optimize for everything. So like, we instituted a rule in the Vue source code where you can't have a const or a let inside of an if statement. So little things like that like most people never learn about, and normally don't need to know about. Like, you just don't even have to worry about, because you don't have those kinds of issues when like most of your users are on evergreen browsers. They can just have the best experience possible, and only the people who are on IE11, maybe that like 5% of users, in some applications, and oftentimes even less, will have that larger build. And so they might have not quite as nice of an experience, but the app will still work. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
It does.
Okay.
I have another question I was going to ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I was mentioned earlier the idea that the docs don't assume too much, and that you can kind of start and using very simple JavaScript syntax. I caught you on a podcast recently where you were mentioning how that can really help folks avoid the assumptions of, well, as long as you know all the modern ECMAScript features, you're fine to use Vue. It's like, no, we want anyone to be able to kind of get on the train.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think in our circles, kind of in consulting, like even when I jumped into Vue, I was already thinking in terms of, okay, component-based application, kind of an enterprise type environment there. And so that was for me and for others kind of I'm recommending to it, it's like, like components come later in the guides. And so I'm wondering if someone already knows that that's where they're going to end up, they want the full-featured component-based, single-file components, if that's a common pain point with the docs, or if there's any thoughts around what the optimal learning path looks like for someone who wants to go directly to there.
Well, actually, I'd still recommend that people start with that space, because it's very useful to know the different levels that you can use Vue at, and the different ways that they can integrate. So, you might be building like a single page application right now, but then, excuse me, pizza burp. Hope you recorded that. But for your next application, you might be building it into an existing Rails app, for example, and you might not want a single page application that completely takes over the front end. You might have like a lot of views already, and maybe you just want to add Vue, for a little bit of like extra interactivity here and there. Like, it's good to know that Vue can be used like that so that you're not forced and kind of stuck in a single page application scenario. And I think since it's good for everyone to know how to use Vue like that, and it's, you know, for some people, that's the way that they'll only ever be able to use Vue because they're not using a build system or anything like that. I still think it's a good place to start.
That's great. Thank you.
But you're welcome to you're welcome to argue with me later and try to convince me. You might. Alex already convinced me.
Yeah.
I'm more curious about processes, and I've never done anything in the open source world, so it's all kind of a mystery to me. But I would be curious to hear, like, what is a day-to-day sort of workflow, or how do decisions get made, and, you know, a timeline, stuff like that.
What's a day in the life of an open source developer?
Yes.
So imagine like a normal developer's life, and then take the nights and weekends and then put in more development work. That's pretty much it. Yeah, I mean, it's not it's not that glamorous. Some of us, you know, education is one of the things that I try to focus on, and community building. And so I do a lot more work coordinating the community, coordinating with event organizers, also going to events and, you know, trying to educate about Vue, and, you know, just geeking out with people. And that's fun, but that's not most open source developers, I'd say.
Do you have sort of like a Scrum methodology? Do you have product managers at all, or is it like how do decisions get made?
Great question. So it totally depends on the project. So for me personally, in a lot of my docs work, like my wife happens to be the like best project manager that I've ever worked with in my life, and I'm not just saying that. Like, this is part of the reason I married her, just because like she thinks about things that are very important, that she has also taught me to think about like content strategy and about you know, organizing people productively. So like I really like to do user testing with docs. You know, that's something that is pretty unusual from the other like doc writers that I talk to. You know, they don't think of docs like a normal product, but I think of it just like a software product. So I try to do, you know, user testing. I create personas. You know, I have, you know, goals that the docs should have. I make up, you know, rules for what should go in the docs and what should not be in the docs. For example, we have a rule that for the English docs, we keep out any kind of humor now, because anytime we've tried to introduce some kind of humor, it just doesn't work for like an international audience. You know, not because it's offensive necessarily, but you know, people just might find it silly too. Like if there's, you know, to give a really simple example, if there's a cat picture somewhere in a documentation page, you know, for some people in their work culture, they might say like, you know, my boss might be walking over and they're going to see like a cat picture on the screen and they're going to think I'm not working. And so we try to be respectful of that and keep the docs casual and conversational, but still, you know, professional and not silly. There's no silliness. But that's one example. And every project within the Vue ecosystem is run a little bit differently, you know, depending on who's involved and what the goals are and how many people you have to coordinate with, that kind of thing. But yeah, we do try to follow good project management best practices as best we can, and we don't always do a perfect job.
I was just curious, as more of the, well, I feel like with Vue's ecosystem, a lot of it was like side libraries that got folded into the main one. I'm just kind of curious, like, do all the core team members work on all of them, or are you guys actually like subdivided into teams?
It's mostly self-organized. So each of us tend to have specialties. So I focus mostly in the areas that affect the development experience. And I also find myself oftentimes focusing less on development rather than like, you know, scoping out APIs, and collecting feedback on various issues, and trying to engage in discussions about a particular problem so that we can come to some kind of solution. So a lot of it is sort of like managerial work, and part of that is because I'm one of the very few English as a first language speakers on the team, and so that's something that's easier for me. And also my background is as an educator, so I'm sort of used to herding cats and focusing on breaking down a problem and figuring out how I can actually know it well enough to teach it or build it. So a lot of cases, other people are doing more development than I am because I find that's not where I can be most useful. We have a lot of really smart developers. But yeah, we all try to use our strengths and our experiences and contribute how we can. And that shifts over time too. We might find, oh, I'm actually really more interested in this project right now, and I have some ideas about how I could make this better. So I'm going to be doing more of this and less of this other project which I was focusing on before, and just making sure that people are still maintaining it and stuff like that. Does that answer your question? It makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. You sound surprised. That was actually semi-coherent.
You mentioned user testing and getting feedback. Do you have any questions for this random sampling of Vue users and Vue enthusiasts that would be helpful for you to gather some information?
Ooh. I take any chance I can get to gather that kind of information. Let's see. If someone is interested, I have a link to a Vue. Actually, what date is it? Is it the 17th already? It's the 16th. Okay, then we have tonight. You have to do this tonight. This is your homework. I will pass you a link with a video with an upcoming why Vue video, why Vuex video, similar to our why Vue video on our homepage, to try to answer the question of why is Vuex needed and what exactly does it do. Also built by the Vue Mastery team, so we've been working together with them, and I would love to hear people's feedback on that. It's like a Vimeo thing, so you can just click anywhere in the video and leave a comment, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. And then we will improve our latest draft and probably create the final draft, unless y'all find something really, really confusing. Then we might need to do another round. So that'd be great. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
I'm going to check to see that every one of you did it.
Yeah, great.
I have so many questions. What's been the hardest part of dealing with the growth? Because it just seems like Vue exponentially has been taking off. I'm sure there's a lot of organizational and processy.
As an organization or personally?
I guess both, yeah. Either or.
As an organization, I guess one thing that is both a blessing and a curse is that we get a lot more activity on our project. So there are more pull requests, there are more issues, and triaging those, can sometimes feel a little bit overwhelming. I can't remember the last time I've been at notification 0. It may never happen again. I just try my best, and we all do. So that is the hardest thing organizationally, I'd say. Just keeping up with the community, because there are a lot of really quality contributions that we want to make sure we can review, but it is sometimes hard to make the time. And I would also say, the bigger an organization gets, the more bureaucracy you have. And that's another part of the reason why I've been sort of moving to more and more managerial duties without even realizing it. Just like helping coordinate people, making sure that they have the resources that they need, making sure that if there are any like things that are blocking them, that we can get them unblocked so that they can do their work, which is very important work. And sometimes I wish there was someone else who would do that. But I do a decent job of it sometimes. So I'm glad that I can do work that's valuable. So that is hard. And I guess personally, one thing that's a little bit weird is like going to a conference sometimes and then people already know you. That's still like an experience that I'm getting used to sometimes. People are like, "Oh, Chris." I'm like, "Did I forget this person? I forget that we've met?" And I have this like freak out moment for a second. And they say like, "Oh, I just wanted to say like, really enjoying Vue." And it's like, okay, I don't think I know them. Yeah. But also, like, there are way more good things and more fun things, like more people to geek out about, and I get to learn like new things all the time because people ask me questions and then I don't know the answer, and then they ask like, well, why did you ask that question? Like, what are you trying to do? And it's like, we're trying to do this, and it's like, and how did you do it? Oh, we did it with this. Oh, that sounds pretty clever. Yeah, that seems cool. And I can remember that and seem really smart to someone else when I explain how they could solve that problem. Yeah.
Questions? Okay, I have one last wrap-up one.
Yeah.
Like I said, I have lots of questions. So the folks I work with know that I'm also a fan of Ember.js.
Mm-hmm.
And coming from a Rails background, the idea of convention, the idea of opinions.
Yeah.
And on that podcast, I was listening to you on talk about someone who already knows you. Let me share with you the opinions you've shared in the past.
Go ahead. I've had people argue with me using my words.
Nice. I'm not like Alex. I'm but you had mentioned the idea of being selective about what you want the framework should be opinionated about. What things are kind of Vue-specific concerns, and what things are, well, just choose your own, web request library or whatever. Are there any new any kind of rumblings or conversations about new things that Vue might want to become opinionated on, new things that y'all might want to roll into the core framework or even into the style guide for recommendations, things to take a more official position on coming up?
Well, first of all, one thing that we do like and we do want to keep is that like Vue is extremely modular and can be used in a wide variety of ways, and still you'll still be doing things the quote unquote right way, or the quote unquote Vue way. We don't want to make it like really easy to build like 80% of apps, and then like pretty painful to build like 20% of apps or 100% of apps after 6 months. Which can be a danger sometimes. So there are some things that we are, working on becoming more opinionated on sometimes, but we're generally pretty slow and pretty careful about that. So for example, when I published the Vue style guide, that was something that I've been thinking about for a while, and there have been requests, and I wasn't sure if I was going to do it because I didn't want to tell people that they were building their apps wrong, and I wanted to make sure that we weren't telling people that they were building their apps wrong if there was like a legitimate way to build their apps this way. And our style guide is pretty, I would say, it's less opinionated than maybe a lot of other style guides, but we try to give some good tips. And in Vue CLI, that inherently comes with conventions that people can use out of the box, but they also have the freedom to break away from those conventions if they like. So being a former Rails developer myself, one of the pains that a lot of Rails developers have experienced is that they know how to do things the Rails way, and they don't know how to step out of that because they're sort of, no pun intended, on Rails, in their development. And so it can become a little bit painful when they want to organize something outside of the organizational concepts that Rails gives you. We want to try to avoid that, but also demonstrate useful patterns for people so that they can follow conventions where it makes sense. But something I've noticed is like looking at a lot of Vue apps, I don't find myself, having to do like a major brain shift between Vue apps, because the basic concepts are still generally the same. And I think that's partly because we do offer some officially supported companion modules for very common concerns, like routing and state management, which like pretty much any large application needs. And so having like a good default for all of those that are guaranteed to be maintained along with the core library, I think is a big strength of Vue. So it gives us sort of the flexibility, of an architecture like React applications, but also the sort of shared community understanding that you get in a lot of other ecosystems like Angular and Ember. So we try to find a good balance there, and we are continually trying to hone in and improve that balance, but I'm pretty happy where we are right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, now's your chance. One or two more questions, anyone? Something burning in the back of your mind?
Or the front of your mind, or the side.
Cool. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. It was really helpful.
No problem.